Señor, ¿cómo estás? How are you?
Hello, my friend. You
How many
know,
la-
it's
how many
cold and
languages do you
I'm
speak?
three, but two well. And Spanish is taking a third seat because I haven't spoken it consistently since I was like 18.
Oh, French took the mother tongue, not mother
It
tongue, but
did,
took the
yeah.
French.
It's the vocab that I just like constantly forget when I go to Spain it comes back, but I'm definitely wouldn't consider myself fluent in Spanish anymore.
Let me ask you. It's a terrible question, but for people listening,
Sure.
who are you? Who are you? Who are you today in this moment?
Who am I supposed to be? Today, I'm someone who's very excited to start working on another novel because I am done with the last one and happy with it being out in the world. And I'm also focusing on playing a lot of piano and writing my own songs these days. So I've got the more kind of immediate fulfillment in writing songs and performing them a couple times in Paris the next couple months, and then the longer joy of delving into a new book. That's who I am right now. I make my money elsewhere because, as you may have heard, you don't necessarily make a lot of money writing novels and music.
Are you an artist?
I would say that yes, although my father because you studied with him, and my dad always said artist is a term that you can never really apply to yourself. It's always applied to you by others.
Hmm.
I don't know if I agree with that necessarily, but it gives me pause when I hear the question because I definitely interpret my existence primarily through creating art. So to that extent, yes. But I mean, it's a good question. What is an artist in this day and age? Well, that seems like that my definition. Yes, I am an artist.
I think about it a lot because I think artists move through the world in a way that's
hmm
sometimes really healthy in like crazy world.
Yep.
Uh, but it is an interesting thing your pop said. Can you name yourself, or does it have to be given to you? And how many times does it have to be given to you before you adopt it?
Yeah. I definitely think I struggled for a while with the moniker of writer when I was starting to write seriously when I moved to Paris in 2010 and then started, I wrote a bad book and then a better book and defining myself primarily as a writer in an era where so many, people define you by what you do for a living in terms of how you pay your rent. It took me a while to get to writer, in part because I started making some money writing, but I also just decided, oh yeah, that's how I wake up every day and define myself as either procrastinating and avoiding the thing I know I need to do, which is right, or do the thing which is right. And so it took me a while to get comfortable with writer, novelist, um, musician. I'm okay with now too. Artist now it's the triptych. Now I'm like, okay, I got to get to that, I guess, definition in my own way.
I have a friend. I probably talked about this on here a lot. Zandy Brackett, and Zandy said to me, Chris, if you are alone making art and no one sees your art, are you still an artist?
hmm
And I think what Zandy was saying is you are. Like you are the thing. If you move through the world in an artistic way and you make and you create, like, does it only come to life if other people engage with it? Which part of me is like, yes. It's a real yes, no.
Yeah.
Um, we do need eyes or ears or something to bounce
Yeah,
off
and I
of.
think I definitely think in the kind of existentialist sense that you are what you do. And of course, if you're writing, even if you're on a desert island, then you're a writer. That's how you're interpreting your existence in that moment. But I do also think in the world that is capitalist, which we are not going to get away from anytime soon, there is certainly a pressure to put your work out into the world in hopes of it being consumed. I mean, that's really what we're doing when we put our act out into the world. We're sharing it with people, but we're also sharing it with people because we get paid to be on a stage or to buy a book. And for me, that's a professional. That's the definition of being a professional writer or musician is when you are making money from it. It could be a cent, it could be $1 million, but there is a fundamental shift, I think, in your brain when you start putting your work out in front of you as a kind of intermediary between the real artist and the public, and then you have the work in the middle.
Let me ask you, this is usually how we start. We got sidetracked into all the right ways.
Great.
Uh, What is liberation?
What is liberation? Liberation, my first instinct is joy. Um, and that's a specific, it's not happiness, but it really is a sense of really being where you're meant to be and present with it, feeling joyful. I think you can find it in various ways. I think you can be oppressed and still feel liberation, and you can also be joyful and not be liberated.
You said it's not happiness. What's the distinction between joy and happiness?
For me, happiness is a more joy has this kind of intrinsic, almost spiritual quality to it, and my idea of it, when I really feel joyful, I feel interconnected. I mean, I've done enough psychedelics in my life to know what that kind of cliche sense is of feeling connected to the cosmos. Not that you need to do it to feel that way. You can feel it in a lot of ways. But I connect, I connect joy with that feeling. Happy is, I'm happy when, you know, a basketball team I like wins the basketball game. I'm happy. I don't experience real joy, maybe if they hit a buzzer beater, but like happiness is a fleeting feeling, but it's also a bit more kind of superficial, maybe is the word I'm looking for. Joy is a more is a deeper sense of unity with existence in my sense of it, and I feel it when I'm playing music sometimes, or when I'm making love, or when I'm traveling with friends or my partner, moments where you really feel like you're part of the cosmos. And then happy is, I do think, in a lot of ways, a state of mind.
I feel like sometimes, just to bring it back to art, I feel like sometimes when I'm making art
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not thinking about the product, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, making love, I like the, like, you can't think about the consumption until you've sort of made love to the thing itself. In
Yeah.
these in my life, when I'm just like awake, creating, not like how will people like this or enjoy this, I believe that I am liberated as an artist. I feel like there's a joy, this interconnectedness, and that I'm like doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. I think that's what I get from your sort of narrative.
It's, you nailed it. You said it better than I did, which is you're where you're meant to be in that sense. That's liberation as well. Because when I think about the opposite of it, of being oppressed or imprisoned, it's you are not where you're meant to be, or rather where you want to be or feel you should be.
So you said, like, let's stay with this oppression. You said, you know, I think you can be liberated even in oppression. And I have this thing, we chat about liberation in different ways. And because I think there's micro liberations, I think there's the grand, maybe, enlightenment. What does liberation and oppression look like? Or how do we maybe try and achieve it or conquer it or fight for it?
Yeah. In the context of art, it seems to me I feel most oppressed when I'm creating for the wrong reasons, which are almost always creating for someone else's desires that aren't my own. And I feel like oppression has a connection to existing in someone else's reality versus your own. Um, I'm like going off the cuff here because it's a good question and I'm just philosophizing with you. But oppression for me is definitely connected to existing in a way that is someone else's desire. And that, especially when it comes to creating, is when you're creating for the market. You know, I used to have a band and the music label says you got to write 5 singles. That was oppressive in a way because I wasn't writing from a space that was joyful. It was feeding the machine, as it were. Liberation is when I'm in the forest with my brother and a friend and we're just writing a song and birds sing a certain tune and then you play a chord, and that, I mean, that the cliche bird being a symbol of liberation, it works because the bird is flying wherever it wants to fly. It's not in the cage.
Pájaro Libre. You know that track? Mercedes Sosa.
Okay, no, but I
Oh,
like.
a must
Yeah.
listen. Oh,
Okay.
you're gonna love it. It's gonna be the rest of your
That's
the
gonna
rest
be
of your night.
carrying me through Christmas. Okay, awesome.
Pájaro Libre. Everything Mercedes Sosa. I'll
Pájaro
make
Libre. I'm gonna note that down.
when we post this, I'll make sure to have the track and all the links.
Great.
Yeah, Mercedes Sosa was next level. Talk about liberation. I think she was. I love this. Oppression is living in someone else's reality. And I think social media fucks us in this way.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because we don't even know whose reality it is, but it's not ours, and we think we should maybe do it in their reality, or
Yeah.
have more of something to share or to post. I love this. I don't think anyone in these conversations had said like oppression is being in someone else's reality.
I think as a 4 minutes in, I'm like, I still stand by this. I'm like, yeah, I think that sounds correct. I mean, you mentioned social media. I don't think it's going to age well. I don't think we're going to look in 100 years from now and have the great fond memories of how it connected us versus oppressed us. There are exceptions to the rule, and we're talking on a, Gmail chat, and we're going to have it on Substack, and that's a great example of ways in which social media can connect people. Although I would I would push back a bit against the idea that even something like Substack is primarily a social media platform and not a community platform that is based around writing and reading. I mean, that is a bit of a distinction, I think, because the irony of social media, especially Instagram, is you get your feed, right? Which, look to the name itself. It's the feed. Which, are you feeding on it, or is it feeding on you? You can cultivate that graph to have everything you want that you think is tailored to exactly who you are. But of course, it's like Voldemort splitting his soul into all the Horcruxes. It's everyone else that you think is representing you, which is of course impossible.
Let's talk Substack a little. I can't, I don't know if you're an OG or the OG, but I do know that years ago, I think you were one of the first people to even mention it to me. You said, I'm doing this thing. You said, I love it. I'm enjoying, like you were like, it's great.
Yeah.
It's really fun. What keeps you coming back? Why is it unique? I'm on it now. Obviously, we're, sharing this on it. I find a lot of, sort of anti-social media components, but I also see it evolving in that way. Like, it's just
It
like,
is.
I gotta become the thing I fought.
Yeah, I will say I've noticed a big difference in the last like 6 months to a year of how it has evolving into more and more of a basic social media platform, which is a bummer. The reason I like it so much is the cliche. It is a community. I've met so many writers via Substack just by people who read a piece I wrote in the comments. I go and read some of their work. I write in their comments. Now we have a conversation or a dialogue coming, and dozens of writers that I've met, some of whom I've connected with in real life multiple times. So for me, that is extremely valuable. As a writer, I never really experienced a space that made me feel kind of excited about writing. I mean, Facebook, you can write comments or posts. That was never really about the writing. It was about the person behind the writing. And Substack felt, especially early on, and still, I think, to a large extent, it is based upon the work and not the personality. People's work is front facing more than the person behind the work. That is unfortunately changing because the model is attracting personalities who um, aren't really writing things that are what I would consider art form, but they're writing about themselves in various ways, which is fine. But that's not why I like Substack. I like Substack because I can read my poet friends, and then I can read my philosopher friends, and I can also find a neuroscientist's take on the 2024 election. I can find these niche subjects that would be very hard to discover otherwise. Um, so yeah, I'm still a fan of it. I definitely see it shifting in negative popularity style ways, but you know, all good things come to an end. If I'm sick of it one day, I'll just get off of it.
You host these events, these like Substack meetups in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
How did that begin, or how does someone listening who's like, I want to do this in Pittsburgh, how does someone
Right.
do this?
Super simple. If you're in Pittsburgh right now, it's earlier in the day, so you should wait until 6 p.m. and then go to your local dive or coffee shop, wherever you like to imbibe, and say, could I reserve a table next week for 5 to 10 people? And they say yes. And then you post on Substack saying, I'm hosting an event next week in Pittsburgh, come to this bar. And that is literally how I did it. And the first time there were like 6 people, all of whom I already knew. Was one woman I didn't know who wasn't even on Substack, and she discovered my like Lulu event somehow. And we chatted about writing on a rainy day in December 2021, I guess. And then the next time there were about 20 people, and I had like contacted Substack, and they put out the word to a couple more Substackers. So that was 20, 25 people. The next time, the third one was like 50 people, and that became its own thing afterwards. Substack now has done events in Paris where I'm not a part of. They have someone working here that kind of organizes Substack events in their own right, but that doesn't stop anyone from straight up just hosting an event, emailing Katie at Substack. She's does a lot of the communications, and she does meetups. Straight up just send her a message on the DMs, Katie at Substack, and say, I'd like to organize an event in Tallahassee. And then she'll say, okay, well, we can reach out, post something or reach out to folks who are in that area if you'd like. It's super simple. You just got to do it.
Isn't that the line? Nike philosophy. It often comes true. You just got to do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
It is an enduring advertising line because it's very true.
Yeah. Community building is really just a matter of telling more than one person to meet somewhere. That's what I've always found. And it doesn't have to have any reason behind it. It can just be come meet and have a drink.
You have these other weekly meetings in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
Your little writers, or I don't know if it's writers. Is it just people?
No, and again, it's kind of funny. It's taken on like a kind of an illusion of its own of what it is versus what it isn't. What it really is there's a spoken word community in Paris. There's a couple different groups, and one of them gathers on Mondays in the basement of Au Chat Noir in the 11th arrondissement, and it's been going on since I think 2009, and I just started going to that in 2011. But I started after a while. Spoken word, I respect it. It's just not my thing. I'm not a big fan of the style of entertainment that it is and performance that it is. I just find writing is a more personal thing for me than it is performative. And so I started just hanging out upstairs, and every week, whoever wants to show up at the bar shows up at the bar. And as you've experienced, most Mondays I'm just there, and it could just be with me and Augusta, my wife, or me and my twin brother Aaron, or it could be with 5 of our friends or 15 if people are in town and want to visit. It's a great space to just say, come here and we'll be there. And that can be discussions about books. It often isn't. It could be, it's just really an excuse to have a drink with folks without over planning it. Everyone, especially as we get older, is so, I dare I say, anal about their schedules. And I could meet you at 4 for a coffee, but at 5:30 I have to be here. And I went tomorrow. Just like, dude, if you want to have a drink with any human, come to this bar on Mondays. You will have a drink with a human. It doesn't have to be more complicated,
Why is it's not a simple or dumb like why are human meetups so important to you?
I get a lot of energy and inspiration from meeting people, because everyone's got stories, and I hate small talk. And one of the great benefits of getting slightly older is you can just stop doing small talk if you want to. You can just ask questions that answers are told in stories. I mean, where are you from is a simple one, but there's a lot of leading questions after that. You can just hear where people come from and why they're where they are in their life. And I find that very inspiring and also just motivating to write and to meet more people, because everyone's got a story. And as a novelist, I'm really interested in storytelling, but I'm also just given the energy by having that first or second drink and people start to really open up. And it's not about who you are, what you've published, not published, where you perform and not perform. It's just kind of like, a simple question. Tell me about your parents. Tell me about your siblings. That can lead to really long, deep conversations that are also therapeutic for oneself. And I find that to be a cliche, but the bar really ends up being a very affordable form of therapy for folks who don't necessarily have access to it. You can get, get in trouble with that if you think that the drinking is necessary and all the rest of it. But it is a place where people feel looser generally and open to dialogue, and that gives me joy.
Liberation, joy.
Yeah.
What is your writing process or your creating process? Are you a percolator? Are you a 9-to-5er? Are you I'm gonna just do pages? Are you I wait for inspiration? Are you turn off the phone?
Right.
Yeah.
I used to I dabbled in multiple, especially percolator versus wait versus 9-to-5. Where I've settled on now, there's a great quote by Somerset Maugham, which is, "I only write when I'm inspired, and thankfully writing and inspiration comes to me every morning at 6 a.m." Because he sits down. I do believe I don't wake up at 6 a.m. I envy writers who wake up early. I cannot do it. I go to the library and I sit down at the desk, and when I'm writing well, I'm doing that 4 days a week. And one of those days, I usually fail miserably at it, and I sit staring into the abyss for an hour and say, well, hell, at least I got to this desk. If it's not here today, it's not here today. Maybe I'll write 7 days in a week if I'm really inspired. But I know for myself that I have to turn off my phone, put it on airplane mode, put it out of reach, Wi-Fi off on my computer, and just sit and start existing in the story that I'm working on. And my process when I'm starting a book like I'm doing now requires research, which is 3 to 4 books are usually foundational to the idea. And I underline an insane amount of that text and type it all up into a computer, and that can be 20,000 words, 30,000 words of books that I've just retyped myself. Wow. With sections below that where I found inspiration, I will write in a different font or italicized or bold text an idea. If I read a Tom Robbins quote or a Baldwin quote that gives me an idea, and I write just like a short brief scene, but then I have 3-4 books worth of 20,000, 30,000 typed up words, and then I start to compile as a puzzle, hoping to have the contours of the story basically laid out, and that's where I really then enjoy the writing, because I go on the adventure of figuring out what the story is about. I write to escape for sure. It's like the best kind of video game I can play. So I don't overly plan what my stories are going to be about, because I want to walk with the characters from left to right, from page 1 to page whatever.
And the big idea that sort of carries you to find these books, that's, what would you say to someone who's needing inspiration? Like, where are the big ideas? Are they everywhere? Do you have to be open to them? Is it in the question asking? Is it in the bar?
I think you have to prime yourself to be open to them. And I think that for me is always physical fitness, because I'm always more mentally focused when I'm physically fit, and fit for myself, not like, 1,000 crunches a day, but I walk a lot because I'm a literary tour guide. That's how I pay my rent. And I've started climbing, and I play a lot of basketball, and I'm always writing well when I'm exercising well, because I find that a lot of the stress and anxiety of life is exuded through sweat. And for me, that's essential. But if you don't like to work out, not to fear. I think just time, walking by yourself, having space. That so many people, take the train and will put on a podcast or read a book, or walk across the city and put on a podcast or talk to their friends on the phone. And a couple of years ago, I decided to stop listening to music when I walked or in transport. And I miss listening to music. I have a lot of music I've yet to discover now because of that. But I do feel like when I have that mental brain space of tranquility, that's when the sentences inspire me to get to the desk. And that requires, it's a cliche, as you know, but like artists require a lot of time where they're not doing anything. But they're not doing anything. They are, plowing the fields, putting the seeds in the ground. That quiet is essential for me, at least.
This is a podcast, but I will always tell people, like, I think so many humans' relationship to podcast is one of productivity.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the myth that you're being productive, that because it's not
Right.
music, you're improving yourself, which is the myth that you need to improve, like that you need to be better than you are. And like one day you'll hear the podcast that will make you good enough, creative enough, smart enough,
Yeah.
will get you to do the 1,000 crunches. But I also say this about books. Like I think every creative person at some point take a sec to stop ingesting so
Mm-hmm.
that you can
Yeah.
actually digest and then maybe release something. Because you can, at least me, I can be inspired forever. I can be,
Yeah.
I do believe we find what we're looking for, and so I can find books and this and magazines and da 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 da, and at some point I have to cut off the inspiration and just actually, like you said, put the puzzle together.
I agree with you. I mean, I'm looking at like a stack of books that has more or less like been in my head as these are the books I need to be reading for research. A lot of them I read as a kid and want to get back to it, but there's always another book to read to make you more well read, right? And this word consumption I always think of is used to be what tuberculosis was called. It's consumption. It's a disease. And consumption, I just watched The Substance, which is an incredible film that everyone should go see. But this idea of the flesh and both consuming it, but also being consumed by it, I think, especially as an academic for years, I went through 2 master's degree programs and finished them. One of which I thought really of not finishing, but that was the same thing. I realized at a certain point, I'm learning all of this and I'm getting the degrees and seeming like I've got all the answers. And of course, the more I'm learning, the less I understand. And that's where that quiet comes in. If you want to write a book about sharks, yeah, read 3, 5 books about sharks, but also what do you think about sharks? That's what the person wants to read. It's not what everyone else thought. And that for years took me a while to learn is like, there is a limit to the amount of research you should do if you want your voice to be your voice. Otherwise, it's just, um, I mean, that's why I'm a fiction writer, not nonfiction. I want to exist in the fiction, not in the reality, you know.
Can we chat about Chat GPT?
Mm, yes, we
Uh,
can.
is it your friend? Is it an enemy? Is it what's the
ChatGPT is a very um, intriguing stranger who I interact with multiple times a week for questions I used to interact with Google. And the voice function on the phone is insane because the voice sounds like a human and it learns a cadence based on what it learns from you because it has a saved memory. And I mean, I have a friend who uses this. I will not name this friend, but really incredibly, they were struggling with some mental health stuff and they couldn't see their therapist for the next week. And so what they did was use ChatGPT to frame their own questions in a therapeutic model based on attachment theory. And then they uploaded dozens of pages of their diary to ChatGPT so that it could better understand where they were coming from. And that's incredible and really rewarding in a lot of ways and also terrifying. So I think it, like any technology, I'm not like it's not the end of the world. It's going to be the new thing, regardless of whether we like it or not. I mean, Google compared to ChatGPT now is a joke. What I love about ChatGPT is that it will very quickly give you the sources of what it's giving you information-wise. And as someone who was trained in academia, I'm always a fan of that. I think it's a great tool. Depends on how you use it, and people will abuse it and use it for terrible things because that's how tools work. But I'm very wary to use it when I'm writing creatively. I don't like it to interact with it when I'm on a creative day because I do think that will, through osmosis, it makes things really easy. I mean, you know, you could say, could you think of a girl's character who's about to cross a river, but I want her to be interacting with a monster that's based on 19th century Transylvanian literature, and it'll do that in a second, and it's incredible. But then, you know, how do I feel about writing a Transylvanian monster into my book? Well, I don't feel great about that. So I do that for fun when I'm not writing, but not for creative inspiration.
Explain the voice. I don't have the app. The voice feature just reads back to you what you ask it.
Yeah, and then you can speak to it like, I mean, it's really bizarre. You speak to it like a human, and you're like, "Hey, I've got a question about my friend Christopher. He's in Miami right now, and he's going to be headed to Pittsburgh, but he really wants to find the two best uh, dive bars that serve tacos, and also maybe a bookstore while you're at it." And it'll immediately just be like, "Oh, great. Well, here's 5 options," and then you can refine it. And then you can do the crazy thing, which is like, can you write me a paragraph in James Baldwin's voice, but actually in the dialect of a 19th century Scotsman who is obsessed with mermaids? And it'll do that. And it's impressive. But the way that it speaks to you with its various accent options is uncanny, and it's kind of creepy.
I do think it is a fabulous tool, and I think a lot of things in this world we have to remember are tools, not the end all be all. Like a hammer is useful, it can't do all things, but it is a good tool. Like
Yeah,
it's often how I feel about meditation. I think meditation is a great tool.
right.
I think physical fitness is a great tool.
Hmm.
Uh, what you still need to be in charge of is, what are you building? What are you creating? What
Exactly.
are you
Yeah.
dismantling?
And that's, I think, is really important. What are you dismantling? Because that, for me, I'm a big fan of subversion generally as a principle of, especially in a world that wants us to be complacent and not think about subverting any of the structures that make us really comfortable. Because that's a sacrifice we're going to see be playing out in the next couple decades. Is what are people willing to sacrifice when it comes to comfort? Because it's a very comfortable world. I mean, I can call someone right now to deliver me tacos and then take me to the airport and not ever give them any monetary thing and feel like I'm the king of the world. It's insane.
That's insane.
Yeah,
It
I
is
don't.
insane. Add in driverless cars, and like out here, my sister, my mom was like, "Oh, we only have a couple eggs." My sister was like, "I can order some," and my mother was like, "The store is down the block.
Hmm.
Like we can go."
Yeah, I do not. I've never. There's only one restaurant in Paris that I've ever ordered delivery from. I do not order delivery in Paris, and it was a place called Little Jerry's, and they had a pad thai that they were closed, and the only way you could get it was if you ordered it. And all these Deliveroos, it's very useful, but I like walking out and having to purchase or make my food. I think that's a valuable human interaction.
To engage with the world. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's why when I think about this work, I think about, which comes from some of the work I've done with Thich Nhat Hanh, of like engaged liberation. His thing was engaged Buddhism. Like none
Mm,
of this means anything unless you actually engage with the world. Like
exactly.
all your meditating means nothing unless when you're in traffic and you want to murder somebody.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
you're understanding why. Like we have to engage with the things, not just dance around them, which I think all of this convenience has taught us to do,
Exactly.
or skirt around things.
Yeah, we're entering a inconvenient era, I suspect. So,
That's the title of your
but
next book. It's a
an
good
inconvenient
title.
era. That's not bad, actually.
It's a good title. An inconvenient era. Uh, Question towards the end: are you liberated?
I am, for sure. I'm extremely fortunate to have grown up the way I did, rather to have been raised the way I did with artistic parents who allowed my brother and I to do literally whatever we wanted in terms of envisioning our future. And I live a really great life that I have people who love me all around me. I get paid to walk people around Paris and talk about what I feel like and be inspired by the artists that lived here before, and then focus on writing books and playing music and living simply but authentically and joyfully. Paris is, as you know, just one of the great romantic cities of the world, and it's not to be taken for granted that I wake up every day and am reminded of love pretty much everywhere I go, because that's part of what's so beautiful about Paris. And that, I think, it is hard to overstate the effect that constant beauty and history and memory and romance has on your psyche when you're surrounded by it without trying. Um, I'm I will go to my grave saying Paris is the best city in the world. So I'm one of those. Sorry, New York. I do like New York too, but
Give me a little context of what it is to be an American in another, right now as the world is going through whatever politics it's
Mm,
going through, to have family here in the States, but not be living in the States, but have your brother with you, and when you made the choice, like any of that, like
yeah.
what do you see? What do you notice?
I came here as a student in 2008 and never really left. I mean, from a psychic standpoint, from the moment I landed here, I knew this was my home. I always felt as an American, one of the great benefits of being an American. So my dad's from Madrid, as you know, but he's a first generation immigrant. I mean, he was the first person of his entire family to leave. And we moved to the US from France, where we were born when we were 2 years old. And one of the things that I think defines Americans and their spirit is that they believe in seeking a better life and in pursuing it. And one of the ironies in this era, I think, is that a lot of Americans are going to be leaving the US to seek that better life or existence. For me, one of those defining traits of being American is to be open to leaving your comfort and your home to a new land because you're seeking something better. And so that's oftentimes French people think, of course, the illusion is that the US is a better place to live, which I, for various reasons, just don't think there's any reasonable argument you can make that makes that true. And I tell them that's part of why I'm here, is because there's just there's a facility to being able to exist the way you want to. And I can't speak for all of Europe, but certainly in France, that is not based on career and money and power. And I think we see the result of a culture that pushes fame and wealth as ends in themselves. You see the result with Donald Trump winning a second time. He is the shadow of America, and he's a fascinating character because he represents so much of what we've been taught without questioning what the end result would be. If you're rich and famous and all powerful, well, these things are corrupting for reasons. These are why fables exist. So I'm very lucky to be someone who could leave the US, and because my dad's Spanish, I had ease of use in moving to Europe. But no one would be the first or the last person to make their way to Europe or to the US or vice versa. You can always do it if you believe in doing it. That is, I think, very American ideology, and maybe the remaining great um, joyful aspect of American ideology is that you can seek a better world and build it yourself.
Hmm. On that note, any questions for me?
I'm really just I want to know a little bit about what you're about to go do a show, and then you're in another state. You've created projects. For me, the question is, how do you, is there like an internal clock that you have that tells you when you need to shift focus from one medium of art to the other? Because you've written books and you've acted and you're singing. I mean, you've just do so many things. Have you figured out a way where that like one thing informs the next, or is it kind of you run with it when it comes to you, whether it's I got to write a book now or I got to do a play or otherwise?
Yeah, great question. What a dance. Like the desperation in me to be like, I've got, bills and capitalism and the things to share, and that old story says take what you can. Um the artist in me who's very good at respecting when I don't enjoy something anymore. Like I have this book that it's about race and identity, and it's done really well, and people are always saying, when's the next one? And I'm like, I don't need a next one. Like
Hmm.
I'm kind of
What's the
not
sequel? You're like, what, did you
like
not read the book? It's I
like like I'm not really into the whole like the sequel would be a book not about race, and it would be
right,
like we can heal in other ways and expand in other ways, and so I'm writing this other book now that has nothing to do with that.
right.
It's my first sort of dive into nonfiction, and it's just about people and love and romance and all those kinds of things, and it just excites me, right? Like when I'm really in it, I'm liberated. It excites me. So I am good at sort of respecting that, but then there are always the whispers of like, why would you not bank on a thing that's working? Um,
Right.
I do know I miss acting a lot, and I've done a lot of theater, and so grateful a lot of people have made my plays, and I have a lot of things being produced. but I miss television acting, and so I said to myself, okay, this is the year where I'm focusing back in that direction.
Cool.
Like I was on a show, and I want to go back because it's fun, and so I think it is that a long time ago. This doesn't make it easier, but I like the language of it. I heard a writer talk about seasons, and he would
Mhm.
say there are seasons of being a good father, seasons of being a good artist, seasons of being a good lover, seasons of being a terrible friend, seasons of being a
Mm.
better friend, and that you respect the seasons.
Yeah.
And that one of the myths of the world is evergreen. You're always this. You're always the best
Right.
man, person, friend, lover, artist, entrepreneur, and that there are seasons. And so I'm hoping this is a season of acting and things that
Yeah.
bring me joy.
Well, you said something that really resonates. The word respect is also an important one because you said, I respect when I no longer like to do something or want to do something. And I think that's a really important aspect of being an artist in the lifestyle way, not in the productivity way. Knowing when it's time to move on, whatever moving on from. And it could be friendships or distancing, at least from friendships in certain seasons for a certain friendship. And then having the self-respect to recognize when something is no longer serving you without it having to then reject it, but just acknowledge that it was what it was. Respect is definitely a part of the path towards liberation, and respect starts with self-respect, which not always easy to find when all the noise is around us and we're being told write this next book because you're going to make more money that way. And the self-respect, in one sense, sure, make more money so you'll be more financially comfortable, but a deeper sense, you get stuck in that mud if you start working on that book, and if it doesn't move you, then you have a lot more problems than a tighter month of rent, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Also respecting that, like, you're not the products you make. And I think artists
Mhm.
need to hear that. Like, I need to hear it. Trust
Mhm.
me, I need to hear it today. Like, I had a rough morning. I didn't get this gig I really thought I was going to get. I mean, down to the wire. And, I have a bunch of people in my corner who remind me, like, you're not less than or more than if you get it or don't get this thing.
Right.
Um,
Well,
and
now that's opening up a space that, as long as you are open to that, which is again the question of being attuned to what comes to fill that space, because that space is not going to be filled by that gig, and now you might, and you will, because you're an artist and you're open to those possibilities, something else will fill it that will be what it needs to be. Because to your point, one of the great joys of writing novels is that when I'm done with it, I don't think of it as me anymore. It's a book. And I can also detach myself from I love the criticism of it when I get it, because yeah, you're right, that could have been done better in that way. That's not, I mean, it's just a book. That was a part of me until it wasn't. Like the drawing on the refrigerator, you acknowledge it and it's a nice drawing on the refrigerator, but it's not who you are. um, I think everyone, it's a cliche, we all know that, everyone tells us that, but then you get into the biz and everyone says this is you and this book is you and this next show is going to be you, and you say no, this is the show, this is the book. I am constantly shifting, that's why I'm making new things.
and we don't like shifting things, like, because shifting things are not we can't put them in a box, and we love putting things in boxes. That's how our brains work. It makes it easier, it makes it less scary. This is why someone with multiple genders freaks a lot of people out. Like,
Mhm.
how can you be two things? And dare I say, you can be 57 things. You
Well,
likely
and to your
are.
point, I mean, this is maybe to, full circle. Oppression is that box. Once you start putting yourself in it yourself, or people put you in them, it's a hard thing to remember, but boxes are enclosures as well. So here's to just saying fuck the boxes.
Breaking free of the box.
Yeah.
Can you tell humans where to buy your books, where to read them, as we wrap all this
For
up?
sure. Yeah. The novel is called The Requisitions, and you can find it on my website, which is samuellopezbarrantes.com. I write on Substack at If Not Paris, and you can find references to the requisitions all around there. But you can also, most importantly, go to your local bookstore and say, hey, I would like to order this book called The Requisitions. That's the best way to help authors throughout the world actually get their books into bookstores. So that is my request. If you're interested in the book, tell your local bookstore to order a copy.
And do the tours. Do the tours when you're in Paris. One, just go to Paris. Then when you're there, do the tour. Also on the
Yeah.
website.
We can do a James Baldwin walk, Ernest Hemingway, Nazi occupation in Paris. There's a lot of options. So I'll be around. I'm not moving from Paris. You'll find me there.
and then Monday nights at the bar. So all good things. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
I will talk to you. Hopefully see you sooner in Paris.
Yeah, you have another jaunt on the way?
Do I have another jaunt on the way? No, not immediately, but that would be nice. But I will open it to the universe. Yeah.
Great. It's open now.
Peace.
Later, my friend. Thank you.